In this Burnout Extra, we are going to do an oil change on a 2011 Ford Transit. First thing I have to do is put it on the lift so we can get it in the air and be able to drain the oil much easier. If you don't have access to a lift, you can either just drive it up onto car ramps or jack up the car with jack stands and you'll be just fine. Thankfully we do today. And then the second thing you want to do once you have it set up ready to go would be loosen the oil cap that's under the hood. And that will allow the oil to drain easier once you have the plug undone. So I'm going to pop the hood now and do just that. Once you're underneath the car, you're going to want to look for the oil drain plug, which on this car is actually pretty large and it looks something like this. From there, either get a catch pan, a Bunsen burner pan if you're on the ground, or something to collect the oil, because once you loosen this, oil will drip out and then shoot out once you take the actual plug from the pan out of the pan. For this car specifically, this bolt is actually a 15/16, which is larger than normal cars. However, that's what you're gonna need to loosen it. What I like to have for leverage is I like to add another wrench right here, and that will ultimately give me a little bit better leverage out here on the actual bolt itself. Especially when loosening, that's better to loosen. When you're tightening, you probably wanna use the single wrench for most of it. At this point, you're just gonna loosen the drain plug. Nice tip at this point would be to make sure that your engine is cooled down, because if your engine's hot and you just drove the car, you can actually get burned by the oil that will come out of here. So that's another thing to keep in mind, is to let your engine cool down. It's honestly good to let it sit for probably about 15-20 minutes before you actually change the oil. Once it's drained enough, you can actually just put the plug right back in and tighten it up. So I'm just threading it in right now. It's actually a pretty long plug. And then afterwards, you have to move your pan to catch the oil from the oil filter. When you're tightening this, you don't want to over tighten it. So with this wrench, I have a decent amount of leverage. But if you over tighten this bolt itself, it will actually strip the threads inside and ultimately screw up your oil pan really bad, to the point where the oil won't hold in and you'll just be leaking oil, which will slowly drain from your engine and be really bad for your engine. So when you're tightening this, just want to be extra careful that it's not over tight. You want it just beyond snug. This is not something that should take your full strength when tightening the bolt. So I have this pretty much like snug there, and then I'm just gonna go a little bit more of a turn, and that's good enough. It shouldn't be more than that. For the oil filter, it actually should be loose enough where you can loosen it off with your hands. If not, they have different oil filter wrenches you can use. I definitely recommend trying to use your hands first and attempt that. This is an oil filter wrench. If you don't have one of these to loosen your oil filter, you can actually use a large set of channel locks and grab it square and then turn the channel locks. If you don't have room for that or don't have that tool, you can actually just hit a screwdriver into the bottom side of it and far enough in where it will start leaking out oil, and then just kind of use the leverage on the screwdriver to turn it loose. That's not necessarily ideal because you don't want to risk gacking the threads that are inside holding the oil filter in. However, if you go low enough on the filter to the outside, you can get it very easily that way. But I'm going to try an oil filter wrench because we do have one here. When you pull the filter off, because this one was upside down, it will have oil in it. So you kind of want to dump it into the pan and make sure you don't spill it all over yourself. That's the same with sideways oil filters. There won't be as much as an upside down one, but there'll definitely be oil in there, and you want to make sure that it drains out into the pan and realize that there's oil inside. So a couple things you want to notice at this point, and one would be you want to make sure that the gasket, which rides inside this top little groove, comes off with the old filter. So this one actually didn't. You can see that it's stuck on right there. I'm able to bend it, and there it just fell off. So this little gasket, you want to make sure it comes off with the filter, because there should be a gasket on your other one. That's important as well. And then when you have the new filter, there is typically a plastic protector. You want to take this off, so otherwise your oil would not filter through the filter. So you want to remove that, and then you do want to help you out tightening, that is, you want to put a little thin layer of oil right on this new gasket. And once again, that'll just help you tighten it down a little snugger, and it won't stick as much when you're threading it on. But at this point, there's not a lot of oil in there, so you can just let it drain for about 5 minutes and then slap this back in. So what I did there is I just went hand tight the best I could, and then I stuck 2 hands on it and went a little bit more of a turn. These things really don't need to be too tight on there. They genuinely can be a little bit beyond hand tight. So if you're able to get 2 hands and get an extra little turn on that, that's pretty much good. And that'll make it easier for doing the oil change the next time as well. So once you have the plug in here and then you have the new filter on, you're pretty much good to put the car back down and then add oil inside the top. One tip I actually like to do is wherever you can see the face of the oil filter, I like to put the date that I did the change and the mileage that I did the change. And you can see I also did that on the side right there, the mileage and the date. Today's date is the 26th. So for me, that's easy. If you're not really sure when the oil was changed last, you could easily just roll into the car, look at this, see that it's that date and that mileage, compare it to the mileage on the odometer, and you'd be good to go. So I recommend doing that. If you don't have a sticker, if you have a sticker as well, then put it on the sticker too. But this is definitely a helpful hand for the mechanic doing the job as well as the person who owns the car if they're not sure. In a 2.0 liter 4-cylinder engine, which is what this car has, it actually takes 520 oil. So you want to make sure that you get 520 oil, and that will take 4.5 quarts, so 4.5 of these. And so you are good to pour it in as long as everything underneath is tight. Once the right amount of oil is in the car, you should be good to go. Just make sure that this cap is tight on the way it should be. And you're all set with your oil change here. It is the best time to either rotate your tires, fill your tires, check the wiper fluid, maybe check your coolant level, stuff like that, just a regular maintenance. Especially if you're doing it yourself, this is a good time to either get familiar or understand that you might need to go buy something else to put in the car. But at this point for the oil change, the last thing you should do is actually run the car for about 10 seconds to make sure that the oil goes through every part of the engine that it needs to, the new oil. And then at that point, you check the dipstick and make sure it reads correctly within the range that it wants. So we're gonna do that now. I'll start the car for about 10 seconds, let it idle for a few, like I said, a few seconds, but not too long. And then at that point, just turn it off and come check the oil. Right now, I am just checking the level to make sure it's good. I actually filled it a little more than I should have, but still should be good. If it reads okay within the dipstick on the reader, there should be either holes or lines that you can look at, then you are good to go. Once again, this is an example on a 2011 Ford Transit. Chances are that the years that this applies to, both for the sizes and everything I've talking about before, is very similar. If not, the oil filter and oil drain plug will be in relatively the same place. But this one is a 2011 Ford Transit Connect. That's technically what it is, and you could probably follow along with this video with any of the old Ford Transits from those years. So that's a wrap for this video. Stay tuned, definitely like the video if it helped you, and stay tuned for more videos like this. We always like doing stuff like this to help out other people so that they can do something like a driveway oil change and save them a little bit of money instead of bringing it to a shop. So be sure to check out our new merch on our website. We have merch up there as well. That's at burnoutshow.com/store. So check that out when you have a moment, and be sure to definitely like the video, subscribe if it's helpful, and turn on that notification bell. It helps us out as a channel, and it helps you stay up to date on some random videos that we have coming out. That's a wrap on this oil change for a Ford Transit Connect, and we'll see you next time.